July 12, 1942. 200 miles behind German lines, Cyrenaica, Libya. The sound reached Hauptmann Friedrich Müller before the vehicle came into view. Not the familiar rumble of a military truck or the distinctive whine of a German reconnaissance vehicle, but something else entirely. A high-pitched mechanical scream that seemed impossible in the desert's oppressive silence. Through his Zeiss binoculars, Müller watched as a dust cloud approached the Luftwaffe supply depot at Berka. His men, confident in their position deep behind the front lines, had posted minimal guards. Why would they need more? The nearest British forces were 150 miles north, and crossing that wasteland was considered suicide. Then he saw it, a vehicle that defied every assumption about desert warfare. What appeared to be an American Jeep, but transformed into something nightmarish, bristling with machine guns, carrying what looked like fuel drums and ammunition boxes, and moving across the sand at a speed that seemed physically impossible. Müller checked his watch. The vehicle was covering ground at what he estimated to be 50 to 60 miles per hour across terrain where German vehicles struggled to maintain 20. The attack lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The modified Jeep, followed by 3 identical vehicles that emerged from the dust, raced through the depot in a choreographed dance of destruction. Twin Vickers K machine guns mounted on each vehicle poured 1,500 rounds per minute into parked aircraft. Incendiary rounds ignited fuel dumps. Thermite grenades destroyed supply caches. Then, before German guards could organize resistance, the attackers vanished into the desert at the same impossible speed. Müller's after-action report to Panzer Army Africa headquarters described vehicles of unknown type, demonstrating mobility far exceeding any known British equipment. His estimate of 50 miles per hour was dismissed as combat stress exaggeration. Standard American Jeeps had a maximum speed of 65 miles per hour on roads, dropping to 15 to 20 miles per hour in desert sand. No vehicle could maintain high speed across the Libyan wasteland. What German intelligence failed to grasp was that they had just encountered the most innovative light vehicle modification program in military history. The Special Air Service and Long Range Desert Group had taken the humble Willys Jeep and transformed it into a weapon system that would terrorize Axis forces across North Africa and beyond. These weren't standard Jeeps. They were precision-engineered raiders that combined speed, firepower, and range in ways that conventional military thinking said were impossible. The journey from factory floor to Desert Raider began in July 1941 when the British Middle East Command received its first shipment of American Willys MB Jeeps under Lend-Lease. The vehicles arrived painted olive drab, equipped with minimal armament, and designed for reconnaissance and light transport. British officers examining them were initially disappointed. The Jeep seemed too light for serious military work, too exposed for combat, and too limited in range for desert operations. But Captain David Sterling of the newly formed Special Air Service saw something different. Where others saw limitations, Sterling saw potential. The Jeep's compact size meant it could navigate terrain impassable to larger vehicles. Its simple design meant it could be repaired with basic tools. Its light weight meant it could float across soft sand where heavier vehicles bogged down. Most importantly, its engine and chassis could handle modifications that would transform it from transport into weapon. The modification program began at the Middle East Command Ordnance Depot in Cairo. British engineers, working with mechanics who had experience in desert racing and long-distance rallying, developed a systematic approach to converting standard Jeeps into what they termed fighting vehicles. The transformation was comprehensive, touching every aspect of the vehicle's design and capability. The first modification addressed the Jeep's most critical limitation for desert warfare: range. Standard Jeeps carried 11 gallons of fuel, providing roughly 250 miles of range on roads, but less than 100 miles in desert sand. Modified SAS Jeeps received additional fuel capacity through multiple jerry cans mounted on custom-built racks. A typical Raider carried 8 to 12 jerry cans, adding 40 to 60 gallons of fuel. This extended range to over 400 miles in desert conditions, enabling deep penetration raids that German forces considered impossible. Water storage received equal attention. Modified Jeeps carried up to 40 gallons of water in special condensers that minimized evaporation. This allowed crews to operate for days without resupply, a capability that proved decisive in long-range operations. The water system included filtration equipment that could purify brackish water from desert wells, further extending operational endurance. The suspension system underwent radical modification. Standard Jeep springs were replaced with heavy-duty units designed for racing in the Australian outback. These modified springs, combined with custom shock absorbers, allowed the vehicles to maintain high speeds across broken terrain that would have destroyed stock suspensions. Sand channels, special steel planks for extracting vehicles from soft sand, were mounted along both sides. Additional modifications included reinforced chassis rails to handle the stress of high-speed desert running, and strengthened axles to support the additional weight of weapons and equipment. But the most dramatic transformation involved armament. Where standard Jeeps mounted a single .30 caliber machine gun, modified SAS Raiders became mobile weapons platforms. The typical configuration mounted twin Vickers K machine guns on the front, each capable of firing 950 rounds per minute. These guns, originally designed for aircraft, provided devastating firepower in the anti-personnel and anti-vehicle role. The combined rate of fire, 1,900 rounds per minute from the front guns alone, exceeded the firepower of most armored vehicles. Additional weapons varied by mission. Many Jeeps mounted a single Browning 50 caliber heavy machine gun in the rear, providing anti-aircraft capability and the ability to engage light armor. Some carried the Boys anti-tank rifle, useful against vehicles and fortifications. Others mounted the Bren light machine gun for versatility. The most heavily armed variants carried up to 7 machine guns total, transforming the Jeep into what crews called a moving hedgehog of firepower. Ammunition storage required careful engineering. Modified Jeeps carried between 3,000 and 5,000 rounds of machine gun ammunition in specially designed boxes that protected against sand and moisture while allowing rapid reloading. The ammunition boxes were positioned for easy access during combat while maintaining vehicle balance. Tracer and armor-piercing incendiary rounds were mixed in patterns designed to maximize effectiveness against different targets. The crews who manned these modified Raiders came from diverse backgrounds. The SAS recruited from across the British military, seeking men with specific skills: navigation ability, mechanical aptitude, marksmanship, and the mental toughness for operations deep behind enemy lines. Many came from the long-range desert group, which had pioneered deep desert navigation. Others transferred from armored units, bringing tank warfare experience to light vehicle tactics. Some were former racing drivers who understood high-speed vehicle control. Training took place at Kabrit, a desolate camp near the Suez Canal. Crews learned desert navigation using sun compasses and dead reckoning techniques. They practiced high-speed driving across dunes, wadis, and rocky terrain. They trained in night driving without lights, using only starlight and moonshadow. They mastered vehicle recovery from soft sand, engine repair in field conditions, and water conservation in extreme heat. Weapons training emphasized the unique demands of firing from moving vehicles. Gunners learned to compensate for vehicle motion, to lead targets while bouncing across rough terrain, and to coordinate fire with other vehicles in the patrol. They practiced rapid target engagement, firing short bursts to conserve ammunition while maximizing hits. They trained in gun maintenance under desert conditions, where sand could jam weapons in seconds if not properly protected. Navigation training proved equally critical. SAS patrols operated hundreds of miles from friendly forces, relying on celestial navigation and dead reckoning to find targets and return to base. Navigators learned to use theodolites, sun compasses, and star charts. They studied the desert's subtle landmarks, rock formations, vegetation patterns, and wadi systems. They memorized the positions of key water sources, both natural and man-made. The best navigators could determine their position within 5 miles after driving 200 miles across featureless desert. The first major operation using modified Jeeps took place in December 1941. Operation Crusader involved raids against German airfields across Cyrenaica. Captain David Sterling personally led a patrol of 3 modified Jeeps on a raid against Tammet Airfield. The attack demonstrated both the vehicle's capabilities and their limitations. The Jeeps reached the target undetected, traveling 180 miles in 17 hours, an average speed that would have been impossible for conventional military vehicles in desert conditions. The raid itself lasted less than 10 minutes. The Jeeps raced down the runway, inline astern, guns blazing. Twin Vickers K-guns raked parked aircraft, while crews threw thermite grenades into fuel dumps. The attackers destroyed 14 Stuka dive bombers and damaged 23 others before German guards could organize resistance. Then the raiders vanished into the night, their high speed allowing them to put 30 miles between themselves and pursuers before dawn. German response was immediate but ineffective. Reconnaissance aircraft searched the desert for days, finding nothing. Ground patrols sent to intercept the raiders discovered that the modified Jeeps could simply outrun any German vehicle. Standard Kubelwagens had a maximum speed of 50 miles per hour on roads, dropping to 25 in sand. German trucks were even slower. The SAS raiders, maintaining 40 to 50 miles per hour across open desert, were uncatchable. The success at Tammet led to rapid expansion of the SAS Jeep program. By January 1942, the unit had 20 modified Jeeps. By June, over 40. Each vehicle represented hundreds of hours of modification work, but the investment proved worthwhile. A single Jeep patrol could reach targets that would require an entire battalion using conventional approach methods. The raids escalated in frequency and ambition. Between January and July 1942, SAS Jeep patrols conducted over 60 raids against Axis targets. Airfields were the primary objective. Modified Jeeps would approach under cover of darkness, position themselves at runway ends, then race down the tarmac in line firing incendiary rounds into parked aircraft. The technique was devastatingly effective. At Berka, 12 raiders destroyed 37 aircraft in one night. At Bars, they destroyed 27. At Benghazi, 31 aircraft fell to the Jeep-mounted machine guns. German commanders struggled to counter the threat. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel personally ordered enhanced airfield security, but traditional defenses proved inadequate. Perimeter guards couldn't stop vehicles approaching at high speed. Anti-aircraft guns couldn't depress low enough to engage targets racing across the ground. Armored patrols couldn't catch raiders who could outrun any German vehicle. In May 1942, Rommel issued a directive specifically addressing the SAS threat. The order acknowledged that British raiders were operating modified vehicles of exceptional speed and mobility. It recommended dispersing aircraft, increasing mobile patrols, and establishing radio networks for rapid response. But the directive's tone revealed frustration. German forces, accustomed to superior mobility from their own blitzkrieg tactics, found themselves consistently outmaneuvered by lighter, faster British vehicles. The technical specifications of modified SAS Jeeps explained their superiority. A standard Willys MB Jeep weighed 2,250 pounds empty, increasing to 3,200 pounds fully loaded. Modified SAS Raiders weighed between 3,800 and 4,200 pounds, with weapons, ammunition, fuel, water, and equipment. Despite this weight increase, performance improved rather than degraded. The key was power-to-weight ratio management. The Willys Go Devil engine produced 60 horsepower at 4,000 revolutions per minute. With standard gearing, this provided adequate but unexceptional performance. SAS mechanics modified the gear ratios, sacrificing low-end torque for higher top-end speed. They recalibrated carburetors for optimal performance in extreme heat and low humidity. They installed high-flow air filters that reduced sand ingestion while maintaining airflow. They modified oil cooling systems to prevent overheating during sustained high-speed running. The result was a vehicle that could sustain 45 to 50 miles per hour across open desert, significantly faster than the 20 to 25 miles per hour typical of unmodified Jeeps in similar conditions. On firm surfaces, modified Raiders reached 70 miles per hour, 10 to 15 miles per hour faster than stock vehicles. This speed advantage proved decisive in combat, allowing SAS patrols to control engagement ranges and break contact at will. Reliability became a critical concern. Operating hundreds of miles from support, mechanical failure meant capture or death. SAS mechanics developed comprehensive preventive maintenance programs. Crews performed detailed inspections every 50 miles, checking for loose bolts, worn belts, and fluid leaks. They carried extensive spare parts, distributor caps, fuel pumps, fan belts, spark plugs, hoses, gaskets, and universal joints. They learned to perform engine rebuilds in the field using only basic tools. The modification program evolved continuously based on combat experience. After early raids revealed that vehicles were too visible at distance, crews adopted desert camouflage patterns using multiple shades of tan and brown. They removed all reflective surfaces, painting glass and metal with anti-glare coatings. They wrapped exhaust systems to reduce heat signature and muffle engine noise. They modified intakes to reduce dust clouds that could reveal positions from miles away. Ammunition feed systems underwent constant refinement. Initial designs experienced frequent jams due to sand ingestion and vibration. Engineers developed covered feed mechanisms with spring-loaded covers that protected ammunition while allowing rapid access. They designed quick-change barrel systems that allowed gunners to replace overheated barrels in seconds. They created special ammunition containers with rubber gaskets that sealed against sand while maintaining accessibility. If you're enjoying this deep dive into military innovation and want to see more stories about the weapons and vehicles that changed warfare, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We're uncovering forgotten stories of battlefield ingenuity that most history books overlook. The summer of 1942 brought the most ambitious SAS Jeep operation to date. Operation Bigamy involved a deep penetration raid against Benghazi harbor over 300 miles behind Axis lines. The patrol consisted of 18 modified Jeeps carrying 47 men. They departed Kufra Oasis on June 7th and drove for 6 days across unmapped desert, navigating by sun compass and stars. The raiders approached Benghazi on the night of June 13th. Intelligence reports indicated the harbor held supply ships critical to Rommel's logistics. The plan was straightforward: race through the port area, destroy shipping with incendiary rounds and explosives, then escape before defenders could organize pursuit. The attack began at 2:15 in the morning. 18 Jeeps emerged from the darkness in line formation, each vehicle separated by 50 yards. Twin Vickers guns opened fire at 400 yards range, pouring tracer rounds into ships and fuel storage tanks. The harbor erupted in flames. Incendiary rounds ignited fuel oil on the water's surface. Explosions from hit ammunition ships sent debris hundreds of feet into the air. German and Italian guards, caught completely unprepared, fired wildly into the darkness. Most shots went high, missing the low-profile raiders racing through the chaos at 40 miles per hour. The entire attack lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, 2 cargo ships were sinking, 3 were burning uncontrollably, and fuel storage facilities representing weeks of Rommel's supply were ablaze. The raiders vanished into the desert, having traveled 600 miles round-trip for 11 minutes of combat. German investigation of the Benghazi raid revealed the full extent of British vehicle modification. Examining spent shell casings and impact patterns, German intelligence calculated that each attacking vehicle mounted at least 2 heavy machine guns, possibly more. The sustained rate of fire indicated ammunition loads far exceeding any standard light vehicle. Most disturbing was the calculated speed of attack. Based on witness statements and physical evidence, the raiders had maintained over 40 miles per hour through the harbor area, impossible for any known vehicle in such terrain. A captured SAS Jeep in July 1942 provided conclusive evidence. German technical experts at the Panzer Army Africa Repair Depot in Tobruk conducted a thorough examination. Their report, forwarded to Berlin, described a vehicle that challenged conventional military engineering assumptions. The report noted the extensive fuel capacity, the sophisticated weapons mounts, the modified suspension, and the reinforced chassis. But what most impressed the German engineers was the elegance of the modifications. Unlike German specialty vehicles, which often required complete redesign, the SAS modifications worked within the Jeep's basic architecture, preserving its reliability while dramatically expanding its capabilities. The technical report concluded that the modified Jeeps represented a superior approach to special operations vehicles. German equivalents, like the Kubelwagen, or modified half-tracks, emphasized ruggedness over speed, firepower over mobility. The SAS philosophy of making a light, simple vehicle faster and more lethal while maintaining reliability proved more effective for desert raiding. The report recommended that Germany develop similar vehicles, but by July 1942, Germany lacked the resources for such programs. As the North African campaign intensified, SAS Jeep operations expanded in scope and sophistication. Multi-vehicle patrols coordinated attacks against multiple targets simultaneously. Communications improved with the addition of radio equipment that allowed real-time coordination between patrols operating hundreds of miles apart. Navigation techniques evolved, with patrols using prearranged landmarks and coded radio signals to rendezvous in trackless desert. The statistical impact of modified Jeep operations was substantial. Between December 1941 and October 1942, SAS patrols destroyed or damaged over 250 Axis aircraft on the ground. They destroyed dozens of fuel dumps, ammunition stockpiles, and supply convoys. They tied down thousands of German and Italian troops in rear area security duties. Most importantly, they forced Rommel to disperse his air assets, reducing the concentration of air power available for frontline support. The psychological impact matched the physical damage. German troops throughout North Africa lived with the knowledge that nowhere was truly safe. Airfields hundreds of miles behind the front could be attacked at any moment. Supply convoys traveling supposedly secure routes could be ambushed by raiders appearing from empty desert. The uncertainty eroded morale and forced defensive measures that reduced offensive capability. Individual actions demonstrated the modified Jeep's combat effectiveness. On September 2, 1942, Lieutenant Karl Janus led a patrol of 4 Jeeps against a German convoy near Beda Litoria. The convoy consisted of 15 trucks escorted by 2 armored cars, transporting fuel and ammunition to forward units. Janus's patrol attacked at dawn, approaching the convoy from the rear at high speed. The lead Jeep engaged the rear armored car with .50 caliber fire, disabling its turret. The remaining Jeeps raced along the convoy's length, raking trucks with machine gun fire. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. When it ended, 12 trucks were burning, and both armored cars were disabled. The SAS patrol suffered no casualties and escaped without pursuit, their speed allowing them to outdistance the convoy's escorts. German investigation found over 2,000 spent shell casings from 4 different types of machine guns, confirming reports of heavily armed British raiders. The convoy's loss delayed a planned German counterattack by 48 hours, allowing British forces to consolidate defensive positions. The modified Jeep program expanded beyond the SAS. The Long-Range Desert Group, which had pioneered deep desert navigation, adopted similar modifications for their patrols. LRDG Jeeps emphasized navigation and reconnaissance over pure firepower, but still mounted multiple machine guns and carried extensive fuel and water supplies. By mid-1942, over 100 modified Jeeps operated across the western desert, representing a mobile strike force that multiplied British combat power far beyond the vehicle's numerical strength. Production of modifications became systematized. The Middle East Command established dedicated workshops in Cairo, Alexandria, and later in Benghazi as British forces advanced. These facilities could modify a standard Jeep to full Raider specification in 4 to 5 days, working around the clock. The modifications followed standardized patterns, ensuring parts interchangeability between vehicles. This standardization proved critical for field maintenance, allowing crews to cannibalize damaged vehicles to keep others operational. The cost-effectiveness of the program was remarkable. A fully modified SAS Jeep cost approximately £800 including the base vehicle, modifications, weapons, and initial equipment. This compared favorably to the thousands of pounds required for specialized military vehicles. More importantly, the modifications could be performed in theater, using local resources, reducing dependence on lengthy supply chains from Britain or America. German attempts to counter the SAS Jeep threat evolved throughout 1942. Rommel ordered the formation of specialized anti-raider units equipped with fast vehicles and trained in desert pursuit. But these units consistently failed to catch SAS patrols. The modified Jeep simply outran any German vehicle. Attempts to ambush returning raiders proved equally unsuccessful. SAS navigators varied their routes and timings, making interception impossible. German commanders considered the captured Jeep from July 1942 their best intelligence on British raiders. Rommel personally examined the vehicle and ordered his staff to study its modifications. In August, he directed that selected Kübelwagens receive similar modifications, including additional fuel capacity and weapons mounts. But German industry, already strained by demands from multiple fronts, couldn't support a comprehensive modification program. The few German raiders that were modified lacked the systematic engineering refinement of the SAS vehicles. By October 1942, as the Second Battle of El Alamein approached, SAS Jeep patrols had achieved legendary status among both British and German forces. British troops took pride in the raiders operating hundreds of miles behind enemy lines. German troops feared the possibility of sudden attack from the supposedly secure rear. The modified Jeeps had become symbols of British resourcefulness and technical innovation, turning a simple utility vehicle into a decisive weapon system. The Battle of El Alamein saw modified Jeeps playing a crucial support role. While main forces engaged along the front, SAS patrols raided deep into the German rear, targeting supply lines and communications. Between October 23 and November 4, 18 Jeep patrols conducted over 40 raids, destroying trucks, fuel dumps, and communications facilities. These raids complicated German logistics at a critical moment, contributing to the Afrika Korps' eventual defeat. The pursuit following El Alamein demonstrated the strategic mobility of modified Jeeps. As Rommel's forces retreated west, SAS patrols raced ahead, establishing roadblocks and ambushing retreating columns. Their speed allowed them to outpace the German retreat, attacking from unexpected directions. At Agadabia, 4 Jeeps ambushed a German column, destroying 9 trucks before disappearing into the desert. At Marble Arch, another patrol disabled an entire artillery battery by destroying its prime movers. By January 1943, British forces had driven the Germans from eastern Libya. The SAS moved its base to Benghazi, the same city they had raided 6 months earlier. From this advanced position, patrols could range deep into Tunisia, supporting the final campaign to eliminate Axis forces from Africa. Modified jeeps adapted to the different terrain of Tunisia, which featured more roads and vegetation than the empty Libyan desert. The Tunisia campaign revealed new capabilities for modified jeeps. In the coastal mountains, they proved surprisingly effective at mountain warfare, their modified suspension handling steep grades and rough trails. In the coastal plains, they conducted road ambushes, using their speed to strike and escape before German reaction forces arrived. Near Gabes, a patrol of 6 jeeps destroyed a German supply convoy of 27 trucks in a running battle that covered 15 miles and lasted 35 minutes. The jeep's speed allowed them to control the engagement, attacking from the flank, breaking contact when German escorts responded, then re-engaging from a different angle. The fall of Tunisia in May 1943 ended the North African campaign. SAS Jeep patrols had conducted over 300 major raids, destroyed over 400 aircraft, and eliminated countless vehicles, supply dumps, and installations. They had tied down thousands of Axis troops in rear security duties and forced the dispersal of air assets that reduced effectiveness. Most remarkably, they had achieved this impact with never more than 100 modified vehicles and 500 men. The lessons learned in North Africa spread rapidly through Allied forces. The success of modified jeeps influenced vehicle development across multiple theaters. American forces adopted similar modifications for special operations units. Soviet forces, receiving jeeps through Lend-Lease, developed their own modification programs. Even conventional units began mounting additional weapons on standard jeeps, recognizing the value of enhanced firepower. The modified jeep concept migrated to the European theater after the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. SAS squadrons brought their raiders to Italy, where they adapted to completely different terrain. The Italian mountains and forests bore little resemblance to the North African desert, but the fundamental advantages of speed and firepower remained relevant. Modified jeeps conducted raids behind German lines in Italy, attacking supply routes and communications facilities with the same tactics developed in the desert. The invasion of France in June 1944 brought modified jeeps to northwest Europe. SAS squadrons dropped into France as part of Operation Overlord, with jeeps air-landed by glider or parachuted in special containers. These vehicles, modified according to lessons from 3 years of combat, represented the pinnacle of the program. They mounted the latest weapons, incorporated refined mechanical modifications, and benefited from experienced crews who had survived multiple campaigns. Operations in France demonstrated that modified jeeps remained effective even in terrain far different from the open desert. In the Bocage country of Normandy, their speed allowed rapid movement between sectors. In the forests of the Vosges, they conducted ambushes against German convoys. During the Allied advance across France, modified jeep patrols ranged ahead of main forces, gathering intelligence and attacking targets of opportunity. The liberation of Paris in August 1944 featured modified jeeps prominently. French SAS squadrons equipped with British modified jeeps were among the first Allied vehicles to enter the city. The sight of these heavily armed raiders racing through Paris streets became one of the liberation's iconic images. The jeeps, festooned with weapons and carrying jubilant Parisians, symbolized both military effectiveness and the joy of freedom. As the war in Europe continued into 1945, modified jeeps remained in frontline service. The Rhine crossing in March saw SAS jeep patrols securing bridges and conducting reconnaissance behind German lines. The final advance into Germany featured modified jeeps racing ahead of conventional forces, sometimes reaching objectives days before main units arrived. At the Elbe River, American and Soviet forces meeting in April 1945 both recognized the modified jeeps that British SAS had made famous. The Pacific Theater saw limited use of modified jeeps due to terrain challenges. Dense jungle and frequent water obstacles reduced the effectiveness of tactics developed for desert warfare. However, some modifications proved valuable. Enhanced weapons mounts gave standard jeeps additional firepower for jungle combat. Improved fuel capacity extended range in regions where supply lines were difficult to maintain. Australian forces fighting in New Guinea adopted modifications based on SAS experience, creating their own versions suited to Pacific conditions. Before we continue with the final impact and legacy of these remarkable vehicles, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, now's the perfect time. We're bringing you detailed military history that goes beyond the surface level, uncovering the technical and tactical innovations that really mattered. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. The statistical record of modified Jeep operations across all theaters was impressive. From December 1941 through May 1945, approximately 300 modified Jeeps saw combat service with British and Allied forces. These vehicles participated in over 1,200 major operations, destroyed or damaged over 600 aircraft, eliminated thousands of vehicles and supply installations, and provided intelligence that proved invaluable for planning major operations. The casualty exchange ratio favored the raiders dramatically. Of the 300 modified Jeeps deployed, approximately 90 were destroyed in combat or abandoned due to mechanical failure. Against this, they accounted for estimated enemy losses far exceeding their own numbers. More importantly, the raids forced enemy forces to divert resources to rear area security, reducing frontline strength. Crew survival rates were surprisingly high despite the vehicle's minimal armor. Of approximately 1,500 men who served in SAS Jeep patrols during the war, roughly 800 survived to war's end. The 53% survival rate compared favorably to many frontline infantry units. The Jeep's speed and mobility allowed crews to escape even when vehicles were disabled. Training emphasis on navigation and escape procedures ensured that most crews could return to friendly lines even when their vehicles were lost. The technological legacy of the modified Jeep program extended far beyond the war. The mechanical modifications developed for desert raiders influenced post-war vehicle design. Heavy-duty suspensions, high-capacity fuel systems, and specialized weapons mounts became standard features on military vehicles worldwide. The concept of the fast, lightly armed raider vehicle became doctrine in armies globally, leading to the development of specialized vehicles like the British Land Rover, the American HMMWV, and countless similar platforms. The tactical legacy proved equally influential. The SAS raiding doctrine developed around modified Jeeps became the foundation for modern special operations. The emphasis on speed, surprise, and overwhelming firepower at the point of contact shaped special forces operations for generations. Modern military units from the United States Delta Force to Israeli Special Operations employ tactics directly descended from those developed by SAS Jeep patrols in North Africa. Individual vehicles from the program achieved legendary status. Jeep number LP4, nicknamed Lucy, participated in over 40 raids and survived the entire war, ending up in the Imperial War Museum. Jeep number LX22, called Excalibur, destroyed 27 aircraft in a single night raid at Benghazi. Jeep number KM18, known as Black Devil, conducted the deepest penetration raid of the war, traveling over 400 miles behind enemy lines to attack targets in southern Tunisia. The crews who manned these vehicles formed a brotherhood that endured beyond the war. Annual reunions brought together men who had shared the unique experience of desert raiding. They compared notes on tactics, remembered fallen comrades, and celebrated their improbable survival. Many went on to successful careers in automotive engineering, racing, and military service, applying lessons learned in the desert to peacetime challenges. The German perspective on modified Jeeps evolved from dismissal to respect to attempted imitation. Early reports dismissing the raiders as propaganda were replaced by urgent tactical warnings. By 1943, German training manuals included specific sections on countering fast, heavily armed raiders. Post-war interrogations revealed that many German officers considered the SAS Jeep patrols among the most effective Allied units they faced, disproportionate to their small numbers. Erwin Rommel, captured after the war's end, provided perhaps the most telling assessment. When asked about the factors that contributed to the Afrika Korps' defeat, he included SAS raiding operations in his analysis. The modified Jeep patrols, he noted, had forced dispersion of air assets, diverted troops to rear security, and created an atmosphere of insecurity that affected morale. He admitted that German forces never developed an effective counter to the raids, unable to match the combination of speed, range, and firepower that the modified Jeeps provided. The technical specifications that made the modified Jeep so effective bore closer examination in post-war analysis. Engineers studying the vehicles identified several key innovations. The gear ratio modifications that increased top speed while maintaining off-road capability demonstrated sophisticated understanding of power transmission. The weapons mounting systems that provided stability for accurate fire from moving vehicles showed advanced mechanical engineering. The fuel system modifications that extended range without compromising reliability reflected careful design work. Modern military analysts recognize the modified Jeep program as an early example of systems engineering applied to military vehicles. Rather than designing a completely new vehicle, the program took an existing platform and optimized it for specific missions. This approach, more flexible and cost-effective than clean sheet design, became standard practice in military procurement. The principle that a well-modified existing vehicle can outperform a purpose-built specialty vehicle influenced acquisition strategies for decades. The cultural impact of modified Jeeps extended into popular consciousness. Post-war films and books featured the Desert Raiders, often centering on the modified vehicles as characters in their own right. The image of the Jeep bristling with guns, racing across sand dunes, became an iconic representation of special operations daring. Veterans' memoirs dwelled on their vehicles with affection unusual for military equipment, describing them almost as living companions in the desert. The modification techniques developed for military Jeeps influenced civilian markets. After the war, surplus Jeeps flooded the market. Owners familiar with military modifications adapted them for civilian use. Heavy-duty suspensions, additional fuel capacity, and robust chassis reinforcements became popular among off-road enthusiasts. The techniques pioneered in Cairo workshops in 1941 found new life in garages across America, Britain, and beyond. Racing applications adopted military modifications wholesale. Desert racing, rock crawling, and off-road competitions all benefited from innovations developed for combat. The emphasis on reliability, the reinforced components, the power-to-weight optimization all proved valuable in competitive environments. Some military modification specialists transitioned directly to building racing vehicles, applying hard-won knowledge to new challenges. The intellectual property developed through the modification program had interesting post-war implications. Much of the engineering work had been performed by military personnel or contractors working under military direction, making patents and proprietary claims complex. Some innovations entered the public domain immediately after the war. Others were retained as military secrets for years. The weapons mounting systems, for instance, remained classified until the 1960s, while suspension modifications became public knowledge almost immediately. The vehicles themselves had varied post-war fates. Some were retained by special operations units and remained in service into the 1950s. Others were sold as surplus, with their modifications intact. A few ended up in museums, preserved as examples of wartime innovation. Many were simply scrapped, their useful life ended. Today, surviving examples are rare and valuable, sought by collectors and military historians. Restoration projects have brought some modified Jeeps back to operational condition. These restorations, based on period photographs, technical manuals, and veteran consultations, preserve the engineering that made the vehicles so effective. Restored examples participate in military vehicle shows and historical demonstrations, allowing new generations to see the raiders that changed desert warfare. The documentary record of the modification program proved extensive. British military archives contain thousands of pages of technical specifications, modification procedures, and operational reports. The Imperial War Museum holds photographs showing vehicles in various stages of modification. Veterans organizations preserved personal accounts, photographs, and technical drawings. This documentation enabled historians to reconstruct the program in detail, understanding not just what was done, but why and how. Academic study of the modified Jeep program has identified it as a case study in rapid innovation under pressure. The program went from concept to combat deployment in months, a pace that modern acquisition systems struggle to match. The success factors included clear operational requirements, direct feedback from users, flexible engineering approach, and willingness to iterate based on combat experience. These lessons remain relevant for contemporary military innovation efforts. The comparison with German special operations vehicles revealed interesting contrasts. German forces deployed specialized vehicles like the Schwimmwagen, the Kübelwagen, and various captured vehicles modified for raiding. But German modifications tended toward comprehensive redesign rather than optimization of existing platforms. The result was often vehicles that performed well in narrow circumstances, but lacked the flexibility of modified Jeeps. German raiders also suffered from supply chain limitations, unable to maintain specialized vehicles, far from dedicated support facilities. The Soviet approach to vehicle modification differed from both British and German methods. Soviet forces receiving Jeeps through Lend-Lease performed minimal modifications, focusing on ruggedness over performance. They added armor rather than weapons, protection rather than speed. This reflected different tactical employment, with Soviet units using Jeeps primarily for command and reconnaissance rather than raiding. The contrast highlighted how the same basic vehicle could be optimized for fundamentally different missions. American forces learned from British experience and developed their own modification programs. The United States Marine Corps in the Pacific modified Jeeps for amphibious operations. Army Rangers in Europe adopted weapons mounting techniques from the SAS. American airborne forces developed Jeeps that could be airdropped, incorporating British lessons about reinforced chassis and suspension. By war's end, American modification programs had achieved sophistication rivaling the original British innovations. The final assessment of modified Jeeps must acknowledge both their achievements and limitations. They were not wonder weapons that single-handedly won campaigns. They were tools that, intelligently employed by skilled crews, multiplied combat effectiveness far beyond their modest numbers. They succeeded because they matched vehicle capabilities to tactical requirements, because they evolved based on combat experience, and because they were crewed by men who understood both their strengths and limitations. The raiders who laughed at the idea of a modified Jeep being militarily significant learned through bitter experience. The vehicles that seemed like simple utility platforms transformed into weapon systems that dominated desert warfare. The 50-mile-per-hour speed advantage that seemed impossible proved decisive in combat after combat. The modifications that appeared amateurish represented sophisticated engineering optimized for harsh conditions. Today, military vehicle designers still study the modified Jeep program. The lessons about platform optimization, user-driven requirements, rapid iteration, and field modification remain relevant. Modern special operations vehicles from the GMVR to the MRZR incorporate design philosophies first demonstrated by SAS mechanics in Cairo workshops over 80 years ago. The humble Jeep, transformed by British ingenuity and combat necessity, established principles that continue shaping military vehicle development. The story of modified Jeeps represents more than technical achievement. It demonstrates what happens when operational necessity meets engineering creativity, when users and designers work together toward common goals, when conventional wisdom is challenged by unconventional thinking. The Germans who laughed at reports of Jeeps traveling 50 miles per hour across the desert, who dismissed the vehicles as insignificant, learned that innovation often comes from unexpected sources. From the first raid at Tamet to the final operations in Germany, modified Jeeps proved that speed, properly applied, could indeed be armor. That firepower, intelligently distributed, could multiply effectiveness. That simple vehicles, thoughtfully optimized, could outperform complex specialty platforms. The raiders in their modified Jeeps wrote a chapter in military history that reminds us that the race is not always to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but that's the way to bet when the swift are also strong, mobile, and armed with multiple machine guns. They laughed at his modified Jeep until it was 50 miles per hour faster. Then they stopped laughing and started dying. The lesson, ignored at great cost by those who underestimated Allied innovation, remains clear. Never dismiss the determination of free men to optimize, innovate, and overcome. The modified Jeeps of the SAS proved that in warfare, as in engineering, success comes not from having the most sophisticated equipment, but from using available equipment most effectively. And sometimes the most effective weapon is a simple utility vehicle, modified by skilled hands and driven by brave men, racing across the desert at impossible speeds toward impossible objectives.